All right, welcome. Thanks for joining me for this monthly gathering call for parents and other caregivers and professionals who are working with or raising emotionally intense kids. I am Samantha Moe, and I love doing this monthly gathering call because as somebody who travels throughout the US to speak on what is happening beneath kids' behaviors, why are we seeing escalations, difficulties with attention, with behaviors, with learning? It's fun to have the opportunity to also share that information with you all who are the direct caregivers or direct educators or childcare providers for these kids who might have some big feelings and big reactions. So to give a little overview of what the structure is for today, I'll share a little bit more about who I am momentarily, but I would love to hear why you're here. So if you're willing to type in the chat box, and you can just stay muted for right now until later, and I'll invite you to unmute. I'd love to hear, why is it important that you're sharing time with me today? I'm in Minnesota, so 2 p.m. Central Time Zone. Folks who tend to join me on a Wednesday have different reasons for being here. And so if you're willing to type that in the chat box, I'd love to hear, so I can provide some customized information and really make it worth your while. And so as I had mentioned, I have been speaking on the topic of kids with emotional intensity, or I call them intense brain kids. I've been working in the field as somebody who specializes in these type of children for over 19 years. So way back in 2004, I graduated with my master's in communication disorders. And I vividly remember having my hand on the doorknob of a third grade classroom because it was time for me to get Charlie, who was known in the school for his epic meltdowns. And as somebody who specialized in social skills and helping kids connect with others so that they could have the childhood that they deserved, and where the whole team felt like they were thriving, I remember that dreadful full body feeling of like, I know what's right around the corner. When I open this door and I transition Charlie out, there's going to be a meltdown. I'm going to have to use all of my powers of persuasion. I'm going to have to keep my own cool. And this is something that, as a child professional, happened day in and day out. Different age kids, different name of children, different types of behavior. Sometimes when you see meltdowns, they start looking pretty similar. And, what happens is we can go through the gamut of self-doubt. We can question whether we're parents, and I do have a 3-year-old at home right now. Am I cut out for this? Did I really mean to sign up for this? What was guiding me down this path in the first place? So for those of you who are here because you have children or grandchildren, I saw half a dozen of you fill out the form to say, hey, I'm here because I'm helping to support my own child who's raising their children. We can get into this place of feeling like we're working really hard and we're either getting conflicting information or we're learning some tools from books and podcasts that don't seem to work. And so now that I've been working with over 1,000 families over the last 19 years, what I've realized is there are some really simple ways of looking at children and their behaviors and looking at ourselves so that we can feel equipped and empowered and confident that we know how to handle really challenging situations so that kids thrive. But I used to stop there. Before I was a parent, I'm like, yes, I want kids to thrive. I want families to thrive. But as somebody raising a child right now myself, I want to thrive. Like if I'm working with kids, I want to thrive. When I'm raising my child, I want to thrive. And so that's what the whole point of this gathering is here today. For those of you raising or working with emotionally intense kids, is like, how do we thrive? So I'll read your comments in a moment here, but to give you the roadmap of what I'm hoping to chat about is, I'd love to share with you some of the things that are showing up lately. This time of the year in November tends to be parent-teacher conference time. And so there are some patterns that show up this time of year of what teachers and principals are saying to me, school counselors, what parents are saying to me as well. And then I want to share a really simple perspective of what's happening beneath some of these challenges so that when we open up the lines and you and I have a conversation, I'm a certified parenting coach, if you didn't know that by now as well. When we open up the line, we can talk about how to look at what's really going on from this lens that I'll share with you about what's happening in kids' brains. Because there's a way that we can influence their thriving, influence their growth, and influence their behavior in a way that gives us energy and helps them to be successful at life. So when I look here in the chat box, for those of you, some of you wrote me directly, which is just fine. Some of you wrote in the main chat area. So you're here because you want to learn more about the programs I provide. Oh yeah, happy to share about that towards the end. Difficult behaviors at school, so hitting teachers and other kids. Your little guy has ADHD, got it. Connecting with other parents, I love that, Erica, especially big emotion kids, and learning how to help children regulate their feelings. Okay, great. So I'm gonna kick off here to give us all some foundational information about what's happening with these big emotion kids, difficult behaviors at school. And before I do, actually, maybe I'll share with you that the program that I'm known for, that I'm hired for by parents and by agencies, is called the Mad to Glad Blueprint. And the root of the Mad to Glad Blueprint is like what's happening in the brain and what tools can we use to help a child, no matter their diagnoses, but really just looking at their profile and the behavioral or mood or emotional symptoms they're showing. How do we help them feel grounded and calm so that they get into this place of self-regulation? So in order to do that, I'm not going to teach the whole Mad to Glad blueprint here today, but I am going to share with you some foundational information. Let me see if I can pull up my slide here for everybody, because we want to answer the question right off the bat: why do kids behave the way that they do? Okay, I think I've got the right slide. Okay, I'll share screen here. I'll just spend 5-10 minutes on this, and then we'll open it up for conversation. So why do kids behave the way that they do? Well, the Mad to Glad Blueprint, which was born about 12 years ago in my career after working with so many families with intense children, are these 8 pillars that work from the bottom of the brain up, that work to calm the survival mechanism, the early developing parts of the brain, so that we can move up this staircase, as Dr. Daniel Siegel, who's a leading neuroscientist out of the US, they can move into areas of emotional connection, emotional regulation, and coping skills. And then they can move up even into this upstairs brain for things like managing their own behaviors, solving problems rather than flipping out. And so that's what these 8 pillars of parenting are all about. They're moving from the bottom up. And you'll see here that when we're using a really systematic approach to get beneath kids' behaviors to help them become calmer and more cooperative, we want to first look at the very bottom, calm the fire. And then we want to move into areas of like learning how to avoid fire starters and build happy chemicals, happiness in children, instead of just like intensity, drama, escalation cycles. And then after that, we're ready for things like, if you move your way up the gray areas, positive discipline. And this isn't typically often how parenting tools are taught. Which is why I created this system. A lot of families will come to me and they'll say, my kid is hitting, my kid is losing it, there's sibling rivalry at home, I think I just need stronger discipline. And as you can see, positive discipline is almost all the way at the top, meaning we work our way from the bottom of the pyramid up, and then the skill of positive discipline, or the tool rather, actually works better because you as a parent know how to set the foundation in order for that to work. So when we look at what exactly is happening in kids' brains to answer the question, why do they behave the way that they do? We want to know that there's the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain, again, coined by Dr. Daniel Siegel, this leading neuroscientist from UCLA. And we know that the downstairs brain is really primitive. It's early developing. It's responsible for survival. When we were born on the forest floor or the desert floor or wherever in the country, in the world really, that we live, the downstairs brain was responsible for keeping us safe from predators. And so if a bear was chasing me in Minnesota, in the forest through the woods, either my fight response would kick in and I would fight the bear off, my flight response would kick in and I would run away to stay safe, or my freeze response would kick in and I would lay down and I would play dead. So this early part of the brain, hang in there because I'm going to tell you how this relates to childhood, is at opposite ends of development with the upstairs brain. So the upstairs brain is responsible for problem solving, paying attention, and managing behaviors. So if a bear is chasing me through the woods, I don't need to think like, what should I do right now to make sure my shoes stay tied? Like I'm not going to be doing problem solving in that moment of survival. Or like, oh, let me look at the raindrops dripping off the leaves as I'm running through the woods. Like paying attention to the minutia is not going to be in my best interest when I'm in survival mode. Or even managing my behavior. If I'm running and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to regulate my heart rate and slow myself down. Let me put my hand on my chest or take 5 breaths. We teach this in schools a lot. Like managing my behavior in that moment isn't relevant. It's nowhere near top of mind. And what we're seeing is that kids who have challenging behavior or they have very strong-willed personalities, is we see that their downstairs brain is running the show. And so it can feel like this type of child is bossy, demanding. They only do things if it's their way. We see them having quick reactions, big feelings, and outbursts. And so it looks like our kids are have poor self-regulation, or they're defiant, or they're manipulating us to win the thing that they want. But what I want to bring our attention to is from the brain science perspective, what we know is it's really their downstairs brain. Your child is fighting back, trying to control things, withdrawing and tucking away, ignoring you, literally running away when you ask them to clean up. Those are downstairs brain indicators that your child isn't able to access the upstairs brain skills in that moment. And I call this fire in the brain, because when I have transitioned Charlie with the epic meltdowns out of his classroom, moving to my speech therapy office, and he melts down in the middle of the hallway, and I'm looking around feeling embarrassed, like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do here? Should I sit with him? Should I firmly guide him? Should I talk to him? Should I be quiet? Should I take out a mindfulness strategy like the breathing? But what am I supposed to do here? That can feel really complex in the moment. And it's not that those strategies aren't great, but if we want to go to the basics so that we can keep our own sanity and the positive relationship with our kids, I want you to understand that when there's a meltdown or big behaviors, it's like there's a fire in the brain, because the neurochemistry in that moment is high adrenaline and high cortisol. So if you think about a moment when you have high adrenaline and cortisol, when your stress levels are high, I personally am feeling pretty relaxed right now in November, but I know that's going to change sometime as the holiday season progresses and there's commitments with events and cooking and gatherings and possibly some gifts and like needing to show up, and the pace kind of picks up, right? For some of us. And I know that when there's more adrenaline in my life, because I'm trying to get a million things done, I'm quick tempered, right? And so when there's more stress in my everyday life, I'm going to have more fire in my brain, more adrenaline, more cortisol, more stress, a harder time winding down. And if I want to feel enjoyment through the season and become present, then the starting point for me isn't like, well, let me do my breathing ball and let me do my yoga and let me eat nutritious food, even though all of that stuff is important for ourselves and children. What it is like, how do I reduce adrenaline and cortisol? How do I calm the fire in the first place? And when we bring this conversation into the parenting realm, there are things that we do that are hidden in our everyday language that actually trigger more fire in kids' brains. And they're not things like we might expect. Yeah, we know when we're like, hurry, 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 our kid might become edgy or throw their backpack or stomp around or ignore us or become resistant. But there are things like everyday words that we use, the way that we communicate with kids when there's more stress and fire in their brain. And I want to take you through an example of this just to really understand what I'm talking about And that will give us more of a complete picture to then be able to open this up and have some individual sharing here. So if you're willing, I'd love to invite you to close your eyes as you listen to my voice and notice what happens inside your body. I'm going to give you a fire in the brain experience. Okay, if you're ready, pay attention to your body. No. Stop it. Knock that off. Don't do that. Ugh, every time you, no. I said no. And open your eyes. And as you rejoin me in this room, this online room here, type in the chat box what you noticed inside your body. So as you're typing, I'll share with you that starting phrases with no triggers fire in the brain. And you know that it's triggered fire in your brain, even though you're hopefully in a safe environment right now as you're listening to me. You haven't actually done something to be in trouble by me, cause me to scold you or nag you or direct you. And that's because starting phrases with no triggers fire. And so I see that you have faster heart rate. Yep, that's an indicator. Where's my heart? Left side of fight or flight kicking in. There's a physiological response. Kay, you said that you, and I'll just call you by your screen name because I don't know what that is. So feel free to keep that or change it if you would like. So you felt tension. Yeah, tension is common in necks and butterflies in the stomach. Feeling anxious. I see you, Carolyn. And yeah, so you are also thinking of the positive way to say some of these same things. Yeah, wonderful. So there's 4 common responses to this exercise, and one of them is tension in the body. And we think about this, so think about this with kids who have high energy, who are impulsive, distracted, have difficulty paying attention. Oftentimes, these are the kids who get told no, and they're corrected or reprimanded throughout the day. No, don't do that. No, that's not what we're doing right now. Stop tapping your pencil. No, I know you were mad, but you can't hit the other kid. So kids are told no, and even though we might be saying that because we're trying to guide them into a skill so they can thrive in their everyday environment, it can be having the opposite effect from a brain perspective. It can trigger more adrenaline and cortisol. The same thing is true if you start phrases with kids' names. So this is really relevant with my 3-year-old at home. I'd be like, mom, 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 mom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, stop saying my name 11 times in 20 seconds. So starting phrases with your kids' names can also have that reprimand effect, that fuel of the fire. So you might see kids who respond with tension. They might complain about having headaches, and you're like, is my kid a hypochondriac? They're always complaining about headaches or tummy aches. And I think it's really important to think about, do they have a hard time with impulse control and self-regulation? Are they reprimanded? Are they directed and corrected throughout the day at home or their school or childcare setting? We see the response of, I call it the wilting response, where kids will get sad and they'll internalize and they're like, oh, I'm just a bad kid. I got the bad color on the behavior chart again. And I see kids as young as 4 knowing this. They're knowing when they're getting the bad color and the note is sent home and their peers aren't getting that color. Young, and then obviously older youth as well, know if they're being sent out of the classroom or to the principal's office in a punitive way because they can't hold it together or they can't follow the group plan. So we've got the tension, the physiological response, heart rate, tension. We've got the wilting, sad, self-esteem response. We've got the straight up retaliation response, which is really common in the kids who are more strong-willed and they externalize their behavior. We might see more aggression and anger and hitting and acting out and negotiating and arguing. So that's a common response. And then the other one, when there's fire triggered in any of our brains, could be the tune me out response or the tune you out response, where you're just like, whatever, not listening. And yes, this is true for teenagers. We think about that with the phase of life that they're in. But this can be little kids too, where you're like, all right, put the coloring away, time to eat. And they just like keep coloring. They tune you out. They stay hyper focused in their own world. So we want to understand about fire in the brain as a starting point, because it clues us in to what to do next. It can clue us into, Kay, I see what you wrote there, of positive ways. Like, what do we do? Well, if we're looking to help our child develop better self-regulation and positive connection and listening skills, we take away the stressor and we learn and practice ways of telling them what to do that are kind. Sometimes that's changing our tone. Sometimes that's adding like physical guidance if the child can tolerate touch. And we also become aware of maybe identifying or labeling what's happening appropriately. So I was talking to somebody just this morning who they have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old at home, and they were talking about the stress at the dinner table and like saying, no, you can't have that. First, you have to have this. And they said, they're just a picky eater. And because I'm specializing as a certified parenting coach and life coach, I thought, well, but what's happening in the relationship? Is the way that we're talking to children about eating creating more fire in the brain? Is it creating more stress, which incidentally decreases rest and digest abilities, increases stress? Are we finding ways, like, are we knowing how to help our kids' brain be in a place that's calm and safe so that it's easy for them to collaborate with us, to go through family meals, to listen to the teacher at school, to line up in the hallway, to go into bed at night without a fuss? Like, how do we use this brain science and this understanding of fire in the brain to influence our own behavior so that we really honor the internal world of children and influence the relationship with them in a way that's really intentional instead of accidental? Like, oh yeah, I do tell my kid no a lot. So to share a couple of examples, yeah, I know positive phrasing is so much easier said than done sometimes. I know it's really easy for me, having worked with over 1,000 families, to be in a room like this without a child hanging on my leg, to think of some other ways of saying it. And that's the point of the coaching field, is to say, what can we do instead, and take it step by step so that we begin shifting some of our own patterns. So just thinking about fire in the brain and looking beneath the behaviors, like what's really happening. I want to prime the pump here, okay? So for all of you who joined me live, some of you submitted some online forms ahead of time, so I've read those questions, and I'm happy to interact with you here. I'll tell you some of the common things that I'm hearing from both the child professional side of things as well as the parenting side of things, and that is, I'm hearing from principals and school social workers that kindergartners and first graders are really struggling with paying attention and with hitting, and being allowed to stay in things like after school care because their self-regulation is really poor. And so as I'm talking to these principals and the parents as well, like, what do you think is happening here? There can be some really good insight, right? Like, principals are, some of them that I'm talking to are really understanding, and they're saying, well, do you think it has anything related to COVID, the pandemic, being at home rather than having these social peer interactions? Like, they missed out on 1, 2, 3 years of learning how to deal with frustration when the other child didn't share. It's like if the child missed, a couple of years of like community programming, whether that's school or childcare settings, and learning how to get along and how to share, well, then it makes sense that they're showing up in kindergarten and first grade and having expectations to show up a certain way, but they might be missing some of these building blocks. And so rather than status quo, like interacting with these young kiddos as though they should know what the kids knew 5 years ago who are entering the same grade. It's like, well, we need to help with the building blocks, just like you teach a 3-year-old how to share or say, I'm mad when somebody grabs something from them, or I'm not done playing with that if a child tries to grab something from them. Like, these are how we would need to break down supporting children, rather than just saying like, hey, you're 6 years old, we expect you to keep your hands to yourself, which will also trigger fire in the brain if we're like reprimanding and bossing them around. So instead, it's learning like, okay, well, if they haven't learned some of these skills yet, what if we all take the perspective, school and home alike, that there's fire in the kid's brain? So let's refrain, let's just pivot and understand that our job right now isn't to teach our kids the lesson. The job isn't just like, we'll teach them the skill. The job is to help them feel safe, to help them feel seen, to guide them the same way we do with the younger kids. And this would be true for middle schoolers. Like middle schoolers, college students, us as adults, like we all experience the stress of the last few years. So how do we guide each other in relating once again, in feeling safe, at calming some of the cortisol? And there are relationship strategies that help us do that. One of them that can feel really straightforward when you hear it, but be really hard in practice, is like labeling kids' emotions. So what I'm finding from, I was talking to a mom of a 7-year-old, and she was just wondering, like, is my kid having a hard time in their faith-based school because of the way my kid's personality and they need to learn to behave? Or is it the school setting? And when we looked at it from this frame of fire in the brain, it was like, well, let's talk about your kid. What is your kid like? And she's like, well, he's 7 years old and he's really active. And so sitting in school all day is new for him. Oh, okay. So there might be fire in the brain simply from having the adult agenda and expectation of sit quietly, hands to yourself, safe hands, sit in your seat, look at the board, look at the teacher ahead of you. That's a lot different than running around and playing. So if we can look at the fact that there's fire in the brain and that's leading to some of the hitting, we say, well, how does this kid's fire, like, how do we put that out and build like less stress chemicals and more happy chemicals, like oxytocin for connection and dopamine and serotonin for happiness? So what we're finding is those are things like, well, definitely don't punish this child by taking away recess if they're having a hard time sitting still in class. Or another kiddo is really floppy in his desk and having a hard time paying attention. And so the school team is saying like, well, your child's kind of inattentive. Maybe they have ADD. And when we started looking at it, this is less of like an aggressive child and more of a hard to pay attention and stay on task child. It's not that this, if we were to label this in the mainstream way, we'd say like, oh, this kid doesn't care, or they're stubborn, or they lack motivation. Well, once we started looking at like, well, why is this kid so fatigued? We started talking about diet, and it's like, oh, this kiddo might need, we talked about, it's very specific. I'll describe what this is if you haven't heard of it before. Like maybe your kid needs a fat bomb snack, which are like these little shredded coconut and butter and coconut oil snacks that are like rolled in with some nuts around them. Like maybe your child needs a fat bomb 2 hours into the school day that they can just pop 1 or 2 in their mouth, because your kid's used to eating at 7:30 in the morning and lunch isn't until 11:30. So when we look at what's happening beneath kids' behavior from a perspective that is different than just labeling them as being careless or angry children, then it gives us a new way to approach them that can actually calm fire in the brain. And then we walk up the staircase to motivate them to begin developing self-regulation skills. Okay, so that feels like what I wanted to share today on this gathering call. And the next half of the call is all ours. So if you have a specific question that you want to talk about, feel free to, there's a hand icon. You can click on raise hand at the bottom of the screen and it will put you in the queue. So I know who wants to talk first. Or if you don't want to interact with me verbally and visually, you could also type it in the chat box and I'll do my best to answer questions and provide some ideas. And then I have one activity if we feel like we wanted to do an activity here today. So it's pretty open. I just opened this up so that we can connect as parents and feel that support. Now, before while you're all thinking about what kind of a question you might want to ask, I just want to say, hey, Anne, I saw your form. I know who your daughter is. It's really nice to have you here. If you wanted to share a little bit, I'd love to connect with you. Although I know sometimes on webinars, we're not always invited to share. So if you weren't prepared for that, you don't have to.
Would you like me to share now?
Yeah. Do you feel comfortable turning video on or no?
Yeah, I'm here with my husband. He's working in his office, and I just quick jumped on and had my day off. So maybe not the video.
Sure, no worries at all.
Well, I'm a grandparent of 5-year-old Hunter and 2-year-old Jack, and just really wanting to help our daughter out because they're both working from home. I'm in the home with taking care of Jack. Now Hunter's in kindergarten. It's in a small setting, and it is an ongoing. It's an ongoing process because this is kind of like this paradigm shift of understanding. I'm 65 years old, a teacher of children that have learning disabilities. A lot of this makes sense. It's just a paradigm shift when you think about the things that come before the preventative stuff. If we have that idea that, okay, this is what we want to see, and then really watching how we get there is the challenge. It is absolutely makes sense, but it's that practice. So you feel good. So you're understanding where you're going to help them. And
yeah,
I so agree with this. It's just getting all the support, and we're all building that support in the same language. And I think that that's what's been a challenge, but it does work. You see it working. It's just the consistency is so important.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate the work that you do and that you're involved in your family's lives in the way that you are. What have you found has been a positive shift with some of these tools from Mad to Glad? And where are you, what's sticky? What do you want to talk through? How could I be supportive?
Well, I think naming the emotions when something happens is so critical. And I think what we're seeing with Hunter is that he's having a hard time. He says the emotion, he understands the emotion, and it's for him to actually get to that higher level where he says, he'll say, I'm mad, Jack did this. But then for him to be there and stay there in that problem solving or the breathing it's a challenge for him. It's not automatic. It has to be a lot of coaching. And he's 5. So it's like, okay, how do we get that state of him to feel this is what I do next and it feels really good and I'm going to remember it the next time, or it's going to be my go-to instead of I got to breathe, I got to be reminded, yes, I know the emotion. I think it's the problem solving and how do I regulate more naturally, I think.
Yeah, good question. I've got you. I hear you. So I know that in your family, there's been some work before Mad to Glad about calming one's own fire in the brain. And so as a teacher, you know that as well, that if you show up yelling in a situation where a kid is yelling, it's not going to work in anybody's favor. So I'm picturing the modeling which are helpful for mirror neurons in children's brains, just to help everybody understand this concept, that we have mirror neurons, which is like a mirror that reflects, right? You see your image. And so if we're trying to help kids move through their big feelings when they have hard time with self-regulation, one of the ways we can really influence the development of self-regulation is us practicing calm. And it's, in this case, there's kind of like the entry point of practicing calm for those of us on the call who might identify as like, well, I'm a yeller and I grew up in a family with yellers. It's like, okay, so first thing to practice is like calm your body and your voice and your face so that you're not yelling. And then with some experience, like you and your family have, Anne, it's about proactively practicing and demonstrating how to get calm. So if you think about something you might use in schools, it's before dinner time, it might be doing the take 5 breathing. So rather than doing it in the moment of upset, it's breathe in and breathe out before dinner time. Or there's a family I'm working with right now with a 19-year-old on the autism spectrum. And we're talking about like, she comes home really stressed out after school. What if the soothing workout that you do together to feel relaxed and let go of the tension from the school day and the social stuff that's been happening and some of the bullying, like what if every day your child can predict and the body can predict, like, mom's going to be there with me to help me feel calm. It doesn't mean that that time of the day always runs perfectly, but if a child has a tendency to have more fire in the brain and stress and explosive behavior or big feelings, every time you remove some of that stress and dump some of the fire out of the bucket by having regular ways that soothe the body, then when it's dinner time and they don't like the texture of the food, they might still have more fire in the brain, but they might not trigger all the way into explosion. So how do we help kids, like a 5-year-old, recall what to do in moments? Well, there's always proactive and responsive. So proactively could be something like creating a poster. Oh, we'll use one of my colleagues' work. Leah Kuiper has created the zones of regulation, which is a 4-color system that says like, here's the red zone. I would call that fire in the brain. Here's the yellow zone. You're getting irritable and itchy and antsy and things are ramping up. Here's the green zone, which is like you're feeling really regulated. And here's the blue zone, which is like below thriving. So you may be feeling withdrawn or depressed or having a hard time building your motivation. So with 5-year-olds, the color chart can be really good, but putting some pictures in there. So when you're in the yellow zone, what supports you so that you can move back into the green zone. And it's not like a transactional, do your chair push-ups or do your wall push-ups for kids with high energy who need that muscle input or output, if you will, in order to feel calmer. But it's more like, yeah, that just kind of helps me when I'm feeling edgy or irritable. So a visual poster can be really helpful, and know that, so what are the things that happen when somebody is in the yellow zone? By the time kids are in the red zone, you can have the taking breaths and the bear hugs and the squeezy balls and the calming corner. You can have all of those things, but those don't really help you reset. It's more like what's once dysregulation occurs, kids often need to come full cycle in order to come back down again. And for all the times I've asked this question, like, well, what helps a kid calm again? The answers tend to be fairly similar. So when you think about the 5-year-old and what does it take? What naturally brings the 5-year-old back into calm? What has to occur?
Well, he definitely goes through it. And then,
Mhm.
you've got that time frame and he just exhausted or everyone just stops talking. And then I think exactly like you said, he goes and fire in the brain. No one's talking. He finally has said what he said and we're all done talking. And he's just, I think, feeling that, oh, all right, I'm exhausted. Everything is,
Yeah,
he's already completed the whole feeling. And so
that's right.
you look at him and you just feel so bad because no one's won. He's exhausted and everyone's just frozen with what what happened? What do we do now? And I
That's
totally,
right.
totally agree with um, what you were saying. I believe you're right.
Yeah.
The thing with the zones and the visual poster for him, because I think that you're right, there's not enough practice and really kind of him holding that space that I can do it. I know what it feels like. If there's not enough of that, just sprinkled throughout the day, it's not going to stay. It's not going to be a tool that he can use, even though you've done it. But if you do it like when he's in the red zone, you're right, it's not going to work. And so I think that that would
Right.
make a huge difference for us, for my daughter, for her husband, to have these little practice things. And like you said, calm body, calm mind, calm face.
hmm
And
hmm
then to have these little pictures before, like just regular ways of doing it, being very proactive, doing it before dinner, having a poster talking about it, because you're right, he's got a 2-year-old little brother that he can share practice with.
Yeah, yeah. So thinking about proactive strategies, I love Kathy Flaminio's programming with Move Mindfully. And she's got this sweet little app. I'll show you. It looks like an infinity symbol. I don't know if my camera will pick up on it. Move Mindfully. It's like $10. But that's a really sweet, let's see if I can open it. Oh, that might be better. That's a really sweet app to build in a couple of times a day, things like brain breaks. And Mary, you had sent me a message. It came through to me just privately and directly. Like, what do we recommend for parents to do to calm themselves? They can do these strategies. We can talk about, well, so here's my starting point. I always love the mantra, calm body, calm voice, calm face. So the first thing to do is like, picture this frustrating situation, like visualize this, and then practice talking to yourself and soothe and like giving yourself the mantra to be calm and breathe. Because the first thing that does is it takes away this fire starter behavior of matching fire with fire. So that's what I really like to teach as a starting point. And then it's layering things in, like Kathy teaches brain breaks. So this is a trauma soothing action right now. If any of you are willing to do this, you can put your hand on your forehead and your hand on the back of your head, wherever it feels good. If your shoulders are okay with that, and you just hold it. You just hold it for a minute and do your breathing. And I love that I have friends who are into mindfulness and breathing and body strategies to release and soothe. Because as a type A Enneagram 2 helper who tends to be a people pleaser, but also perfectionistic, it's like, oh, yeah, my brain gets going really fast throughout the day too. So having these 1-minute practices that we actually practice will calm the fire in our own brains. I want to type in here again, Mary, you asked me for a video that teaches children. Oh, about fire in the... I pulled a video right here on talking about fire in the brain for parents. But the video for kids, I do have something. There's a video called Why Do We Lose Control of Our Emotions? And this is a nice one to share with kids. It's a little line drawing or like a little video that shows kids going through when their brain gets enraged and how to calm it. So I think if we, so let me just pause for a second. So Anne, to like come full circle and answer your question, then if others have questions, I'd love to hear them, or just comments about this concept. There are lots of tools to proactively calm fire in the brain. So Move Mindfully are good tools. The way that we parent, like, are we slowing down? I feel like by the time you get into the red zone, the tools are like, say less, breathe more, talk quieter, move slower, let time pass. Like those are kind of the things that naturally happen. And then kids go full cycle. So it's more like in this yellow zone, like, what do we do when things are building? And there are some kids who we do need something like positive discipline, where that's one of my pillars, where we spell out what the family rules are. And if there's hitting, then we do this system for broke a rule, take a break. It's kind of like interrupting the pattern, but we're time in with the kids so they're not being abandoned, because that can trigger more fire in the brain. I forgot where I was going with that for a second. Oh, I was picturing this whole scenario. Um, I see. Yeah. So there are strategies that we can do proactively with family rules, and then we can do like this break system to reset. And some kids really need something where you reset in a way that's quiet and there's not a lot of talking because that's soothing, versus other kids who are, I was talking to somebody who's like, yeah, my kid goes out there and they bounce the basketball and they throw stuff from the garage out into the yard. And we're like, oh my gosh, what are the neighbors going to think? Right. I'm like, oh, and my kid hits me in the back. I'm like, oh, so the way your kid's body moves when there's fire in her brain is she's doing things that create noise and impact. So she's not somebody who probably needs like breathing activity. She probably needs something like plank or push-ups, or for littler kids, what you might see in the school setting is that they push with their hands against the adult's hands and they get that pressure because they're trying to get the anger to move through their body to calm their own fire in the brain. So there's lots, my point being then again, so there's tools, there's parenting tools, there's mindfulness tools. There can be things like, well, if there's a lot of fire in the brain, when my kiddo was born, I created this really quiet environment because that was a philosophy I was following. And like, oh my gosh, my kid cries a lot. And there were some other reasons. There was some birth trauma and some weight gain issues and inflamed digestion, food sensitivity. Like there were just a lot of things happening in the first months of my kiddo's life. But I remember when my sister, one of his aunties, came over and he was about 3.5 months old, and she lays him on the floor and she's like, ah, da, 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 ah, da, 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 and like providing all this visual affect and talking to him, which was fine. Like I wasn't intentionally not doing that, but he lit up and he was giggling and he was happy. And I was like, oh, I forgot this very important thing. We can't just create a calm environment. We have to input happy chemicals. So how does this kiddo get happy? And to this day, my just over 3-year-old child likes to talk a lot, likes to make a lot of affect with his face. So if there's a 5-year-old who's quick to trigger and has a hot temper, it's like, oh, does that kiddo need less soothing? Let's take walks in the woods and throw rocks in Lake Superior. I know where you guys live. Like those are all good soothing activities. But does he need like heavy output things, like one of the mindfulness poses is wood chopper, where you go, you bend over and you act like you're chopping wood. We have our kiddo in something called Kid Strong, and they're like jumping up on these foam things and they're hanging from a tire swing like a monkey, and then I'm like, it's a lot of impact. So those are the considerations if you're ever in any of my parenting programs, as we look for how to calm fire in the brain.
Oh, exactly, Samantha. I just want to let you know that my daughter and I are both introverts. And so for us to feel collected, calm body, calm mind, calm voice, it's like, yes, quiet is healthy for us. And you're right, it's the opposite when we're with Hunter. He definitely wants to have that out, right? It's in him. He wants to get it out. Therefore, he could have the peak and then the plateau and then come down. But you're right, the plank. And it's all those things, you're right, thinking about the prior, the pre. If he's gonna have too much quiet, something's gonna, set him off. So you're right. The throwing and the wood chopping and the plank, I get it. That's perfect.
Good. Yeah, good. So I was picturing again, just Lake Superior up into Duluth, like it's so like soothing water, throwing rocks in the water. It's like he might need to be someone who like takes the rocks and slams them down, thinking like medicine ball slams down in the gym, like slam the rocks onto the other rocks, because it decreases the fire in the brain. Like he needs more of that impact. It's also in early childhood family education, they call it like positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement. So if there hasn't been enough like exciting affect and exchange, because we're introverts and we like things to be peaceful, then the child will create incidents and get it on the flip side. They'll get it on the negative side. And then you're kind of like held hostage to it.
That's it.
So good.
Thank you. That's exactly right. That's what he does. That's the perfect scenario. of how this all
Yeah.
comes out, because there is quiet, everything is fine, and then all of a sudden something will happen. And I think you hit it right on that head. And I think now we can focus on really looking at the time frame of how much quiet, how much calm, because you're right, there's this transition to his day, and we think, how did all of a sudden this just fall apart? And what, and then it's
Mm,
always being closer to his little brother, or wanting to do something different, more active, and that's he's expressing it, and we're not interpreting it correctly. Perfect.
yeah, very nice. So have Lacey refer back to pillar number 3, happy chemicals, and know that when you can do something like the happy chemical strategy, 5, 10, or 15 minutes, it will buy you 10 or 15 minutes of quiet time on the other side. So you just flip it. You meet the kids' need first, and then it helps meet that introverted quiet need.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I'm glad you showed up today. Okay, so we have just under 10 minutes left here, and I'm happy to answer some more of these questions. I see your questions, Mary. I feel like I was going to say something else. Yeah, if you heard something just now that resonates for your family, feel free to type that in the chat box too, because it helps me to see if we're on track with where this conversation is going. And now is the time to raise your hand if you feel like you want to talk to me directly here. I'm happy to interact. Otherwise, I'll look at some of these questions I'm getting. All right. So Erica, earlier on today, you were mentioning, and if you want to unmute, I'd love to chat with you. So you're saying that your 5-year-old pre-K hasn't hit teacher in a while, but can't keep hands to self now. Seems he can't walk down the hallway without touching everyone. Not mean hits, but has to keep his hands busy. It's a new goal to help him keep his hands to himself. Oh, that's such a good question. Let me know if you want to chat about it. Turn your audio on. Otherwise, I'll riff. Oh yeah, hey.
Yeah, I'm on now. Yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. I mean, I can explain more if you want me to.
Yeah, I mean, the gist is good. Could I comment on it and then you comment back to me?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, cool. So, yeah. When there's a child who's touching everybody, this could be labeled as something like impulsive, but I'm more curious about like, why isn't the filter to stop touching turning on, especially when he's getting a lot of cognitive teaching around it? So this is like manage behavior. This is upstairs brain's good. Manage behavior. Keep your hands to yourself. Don't hit. Don't touch. But sometimes when you're seeing something with this much frequency, I'm curious if there's a sensory seeking thing happening. Have you ever explored that?
I mean, I don't know. There could be. I mean, he's had we got denied after doing an evaluation with OT. We've explored some school district IEP things, which, say that he needs to work on behavior and adaptability. We're kind of stuck with, maybe it's like the psychological pediatric anxiety. No one's labeling ADHD or autism. So definitely big emotions are at play, but I'm a little bit at a loss as to what exactly the issues or the diagnosis is.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so if you've explored OT and he hasn't qualified, sometimes the difference, I get curious, like, was it school OT or external clinic, like pediatric clinic OT?
It was private pediatric clinic, and they take so
Okay.
much subjective information from the parents, and then the school district did the parents plus the teachers, and So I don't know if that's where we're kind of missing the mark, if like we're not scoring him accurately or correctly, and then the teachers tend to score him a little bit lower in terms of not getting along with others, basically.
So it's not just, so I heard you say maybe more than this then. So it's the touching kids. It's, you said something about having a hard time adapting. And then are there some behavior things happening too?
There are, gosh, it's so hard to explain, especially like in a short minute, but
Sure.
like
And I'll just to interject to help you feel comfortable. I'm happy to also share. We'll send an email out after this, and there'll be a link if anybody wants to do a 30-minute private one-on-one session with me to talk about family. So know that you don't have to rush it. If you're like, this is too much to explain, we could still talk about it more in depth privately.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. Just I guess it's definitely improved. You know, there were times when he would get so angry that he did kick a teacher. But yeah.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. Well, if you want to talk about this more, I feel that time pressure too, because there's more complexity here. I'm going to put, the consideration, and this is part of the point of the gathering, and then I'll talk more about my programming because I'm getting some questions there in my private chat box, is what's happening? Like, that's my question. Like, when there's behaviors and low adaptability and our kids are having, like, kind of getting identified as having some difficulties, what do we need to help them thrive? I just had this conversation with my sister, like, okay, parent teacher conferences. She called me. She's like, I know you got the resources. What do we need? And we were looking at things like functional vision and can your kid see to the front of the room? And is that why he's tuning out? And like all of these things, right? But when I see things like touching and I hear you say like having a hard time adapting, if he's doing okay at home, it may not be that it's about parenting strategies and discipline and teach him the right way of being and acknowledge his feelings, which are all important parenting tools. It might be something like the way his brain is holding on to stress. And I'm seeing little kid brains hold on to a lot of stress post-pandemic for lots of reasons. We modeled stress, germs was scary, you couldn't be around people, we were frustrated at home, there was more, whatever, junk food, like whatever it is, more screen time, like there was a lot of more stress. And so I'm seeing little kid brains hang on to more stress. So how do we release that stress? I put something in the chat box of the Perfect Storm webinar. It's a holistic approach that talks about why some kids have a tendency to hold on to more stress and have a hard time releasing it. It's by the leading pediatric chiropractor from the US. And sometimes that can connect some dots for people. So if you feel like you want to watch that video, everyone's invited. It's a free webinar replay. It's amazing to listen to. And it might guide you down a path to say, if there's not parenting tools that are needed because things are okay at home, but they're hard at school, does my kid's body need support in being more adaptive? And so that's what the Perfect Storm talks about. So I'll leave you with that. And like I said, if anybody wants to book a one-on-one conversation with me, I'm happy to do that. I just have you fill out a form ahead of time so that I understand what the behaviors are and we can have a really deep conversation. I get really nosy asking you questions about your family. So that will come in an email. But let me answer some of these questions from Mary. You're welcome for those video links. So what helps children with ADHD and sensory processing disorder? It depends what's happening. If there's some behaviors happening at home, very often parenting strategies are needed. If there are behaviors happening not at home, primarily at school, sometimes it's some of the relationship strategies and coping strategies that you're doing really well at home. Sometimes it's that the school environment may not be using some of those tools. And I'm seeing it right now with the school that's really emphasizing obedience for this kid who has ADHD and needs to move his body. I'm just like, I mean, I get that you like the philosophy of the school, and this kiddo isn't thriving here because he needs more movement and OT and some special ed services to help him thrive. So I recommend often with kids with sensory processing disorder, something that helps them calm their nervous system from the inside out So that's where something like occupational therapy, they can do an assessment and figure out like what kind of movements and reflex integration is needed so that your kid gets the calm signal sent back up to their brain instead of like, oh, I'm missing this reflex about holding my core stable and now I'm floppy. Like, how do we like get them activated and alert? Or how do we calm them down so they're not reaching and touching and seeking and making noises and echo, like some of those things that can happen with certain types of kiddos. So like what is needed from the inside out, so that can be OT, this perfect storm webinar, this can be pediatric chiropractic that's very gentle to help balance out the brain chemistry. And then there's like the outside in, what kind of parenting tools are needed? And I certainly get hired in schools to do, I call it behavior boot camp, but it's mostly like pre-escalation strategies. So child care centers will hire me to do a 6 hours professional development day. Like, what are the top tools that teachers need so that you can prevent challenging behaviors? So it's just my parenting version of Mad to Glad Blueprint turned into the professional version. And you were asking about programs. If you have more questions, Mary, I can answer them. I tend to recommend families of kids age 3 to 13 is my sweet spot. You can learn the tools when your kid is 2. There's a couple that don't apply until they're 3. And then over the age of 13, if a child has cognitive delay or some sort of special needs diagnosis, they can still benefit above the age of 13. But where I don't specialize is like what happens if your teenager takes the car keys and sneaks out after curfew. So for me, it's mostly like, how do we create calm, connection, and cooperation when you're raising a kid age 3 to 13? And the perspective is calm fire in the brain. Mary, do you want to unmute and chat a little bit more, or are there any other questions that you have? Okay, I don't see you unmuting. That can be many reasons. So if anybody's interested, let me show you where that link is for booking a one-on-one complimentary conversation if you are interested. The way my programs work is, I'll just speak briefly and you can learn more if you want, but if you go to SamanthaMo.com to the parents page and you scroll down, I have 2 parenting programs. One is DIY. So you can get my 8 modules of the Mad to Glad Blueprint that walk you step by step with how to implement tools at home. Like I was talking to Anne saying, like, go watch module 3, watch pillar 3. That's important for you right now. And included in this DIY program, you also get 2 months in my parent coaching community. So it's where we gather on a call like this, but it's for anybody who's on the paid programming side of things. So videos are on and we do spot coaching. So 10 and 15-minute sessions where I get to know your family and answer your questions. And you get to keep that program, those 8 pillars. You have lifetime access, so you can repeat them as much as you want. And then I have my plus program. So it's Mad to Glad Blueprint Plus, which includes a seat in my live 8-week cohort where I guide you through the 8 pillars and take you through a group of people online through activities to customize each strategy for their family so that you know exactly how to implement it based on your age and symptoms really that your kid is showing. I started one in October and I don't run my next one until March. So if you wanted to read about that, that's what the second option is. And I provide early bird access. So if you wanted to talk about it, you get DIY while you're waiting for March to start. But otherwise, I don't have open enrollment until we get into the new year. So this is where I have this connection call. So if you felt like you wanted to have a one-on-one call with me, I set aside a few slots a week to connect one-on-one, and I call it the how to make it better call, where I get nosy and ask about your family so that I can help you identify, like, is it parenting that's needed in this situation, or is it a different strategy? Because I have a wealth of resources. Okay, Mary, I see your comment. So let you ask me more questions. I use Zoom for calls in my program. The online members area is a different platform, but that way we can send the replay out really easily. Okay. So let me just get this link, type it in the chat box, and then we can do our official goodbye for today. So I just want to thank, oh, I did already put in the chat box. Okay. Oh, Mary, Can you sign up for option 1 DIY and upgrade to option 2? Yep. When you sign up for DIY, we tag you as an alumni. That means you've purchased one of my programs. So you actually get a coupon code to join the Plus program. That's actually the better way to do it. I think overall you save a few $100 when you do it that way. So yes, you can certainly do that. And then you're on our list to invite you in to the upgraded program. And it's nice because then you get a taste of the tools. You can see if you alone can hold yourself accountable for learning the tools and implementing them. And if not, then join me. Happy to have you have a seat. All right, so I feel like one of in parting, what I wanted to share today, I was thinking about this, is when we learn about something like fire in the brain, whether it's your first time learning about it or your 11th time, people will come to my free monthly gathering call a few times sometimes. And, sometimes you need to hear it a few times, or maybe you want the courage to be able to speak to me, which I welcome it all, is if you had no further resources, if you didn't buy parenting tools, you didn't get an OT evaluation, you didn't watch another webinar, like on the perfect storm and pediatric chiropractic, based on what you heard today, what do you have the power? What would be a 15% solution? What is in your power that you could shift things with in your work environment or in your family environment, so that, let me just see I had a question written down here. Oh, that's right. Like, what could you do even if you had no more resources or authority? What would be your 15% to take this information and bring an improvement into your life? So if you're willing to type that in the chat box, it's kind of like, what's your takeaway? What could you take from here today and implement immediately that could make a difference in your personal and professional life? So I'll give you half a minute to jot something down. And we do this activity throughout the live program that I teach in October and March, so that after we've learned a bunch of tools, we don't get stuck. We don't say like, oh, I got to do it perfectly, or, oh, there's nothing I can do. I like that. Yeah. Okay. Put yourself in your kids' shoes and think about their perspective. Yeah. And sometimes their perspective isn't like they're angry and stressed out as a kid. Sometimes the perspective is there's fire in the brain and they don't even know it. There's so many times where we're like, why'd you do that? Like, I don't know. Or they're crying like, I'm sorry, I don't want that to happen again. And then it happens again. It's like, all right. That's where parenting tools can be supportive, so that you can help calm their fire in their brain and they can step into that and feel good about life. All right. And you got the calm mantra: calm body, calm voice, calm face, eye contact with sincerity and understanding. Yeah. Happy chemicals, proactive excitement. Meet that psychological need. I love it. Great. Well, thank you all for joining me here today. Yeah, I hope that you navigate the rest of this season with some ease, and remember that we can't control our kids' behavior, but we can certainly influence them. And when you have some of this knowledge about the brain science, it can make a really big difference, even for these kiddos who are emotionally intense and have a hard time having self-control. Mary, I'll pop this link to schedule a meeting with me, because you said you wanted to request a call, in the chat box. Click on this link and choose a time that's convenient for you before you leave the call today. And yeah, good luck with other videos. Feel free to book a call with me. I'm happy to support all families, and take good care. Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody. I see that, Anne. Thank you for the celebration emoji. Bye. Take good care. You're welcome. You're welcome.